Okay, so we're going to start looking at the causes of WW2, World War II, and how the events, the cultural, especially the political events, led to World War II. And if we're getting Mussolini, Hitler, Tojo in Japan, and that those conflicts and how the Depression affected that, how the Treaty of Versailles affected that. So for this week, and this week, you're going to do two activities, and they're fairly extensive. These are going to be test grades. One of which is a fairly straightforward thing. So I've put a fairly straightforward activity. The other, which is a little less, a little more involved, and you've got this week to complete and work on that. And you've got some rare extra credit. So I've got quite a bit to go through here, so you're going to need to stick with me. One of which is part one, the practice quiz. This is graded at 60%. You may take it as many times as you want. You're going to need to use the causes of World War II reading, political causes. The political causes slideshow video notes. You're not taking notes. I present them as a video. Yep, got to listen to me. You can stop it in places that you need to. And the same thing with Stalin. My brief interlude, very brief interlude, in talking about Stalin and the Soviet Union, and then the world between the wars, and the culture and how the Depression starts to affect worldwide events. Okay. These quiz questions are matching, multiple choice, fill in the blank, a short answer question, and again, you can answer these as many times as you need to get the score that you would like. Some of them are matching on the vocabulary, and again, the reading will help you here. Especially, I would have that reading up. I would have all three YouTube videos up as you're watching it. Secondarily, you can use that my open book chapter 12, but that'll really help you more with the timeline piece. So that piece is due on Wednesday. Okay, that's more straightforward. Again, you should be able to finish that maybe even sooner than that. But the other piece is part two. Part two, and this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. You're going to create a timeline, a minimum of 9 events of the year for this years of crisis. So the years of crisis is basically, the task is to tell the story of the years of crisis using a timeline, and potentially, I guess we should say in this case, potentially view it from the perspective of someone living in the time period. So again, part one is that practice quiz in Google form. Part two is to take a timeline of the events, the political, cultural, and economic events that are significant during this time period. It needs to be a minimum of 9 events, and it should include all the areas of 19 events that affected from the following areas that affected worldwide the world in 1919 through 1914 that led up to World War II. So again, and it should also include a brief description and details about the impact of the event. What happened? How did it impact world history and or cause World War II? What happened? And how did it cause and impact world history and or cause World War II? You should have one from each of the following areas: scientific discoveries, arts and literature. And I go through a brief interlude about talk about Freud, and talk about Salvador Dali, and talk about some of the art and literature discoveries in my slideshow. You can find them in my open book chapter 12 if you're looking for a guidance there. But again, this slideshow will kind of the one that's this world between the wars, culture, and depression. That will kind of guide you through the scientific one, in the arts and literature a little bit, and give you some ideas. You can also use in my open book chapter 12 outside resources. Post-World War I politics in Great Britain and France. That one could be a little bit more difficult. You're looking at in my open book chapter 12 for that one. Would probably be your best bet to help you with that in terms of in terms of being able to help guide you with that. Rise of Fascism in Italy and the Soviet Union under Stalin. Those can both be found in the readings, and also outside resources. When we're talking about post-World War I politics of Great Britain and France, we're talking about League of Nations. We're talking about the idea that they want to punish Germany. So those are some of the ideas there. Notice I don't have anything about Hitler or care about Hitler on this. You can put events that talk about Nazi Germany. We know about the events in Nazi Germany. Like it look beyond them. You could put events in Nazi Germany. I just like it to look beyond them. The practice quiz certainly answers events in Nazi Germany, and you can talk about them. But I'm not. I want you to think about the other areas as well. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas there. You can certainly add the Nazi ones. I would expect that people would. Okay, so that's the timeline. And let me show you a couple of examples of timelines here, if they would ever come up from last year. So if you look at a couple of examples of timelines, and these I had a little different requirement last year, but you can go through them, and my screencast is being very slow, so you're just gonna have to wait a minute while the slide comes up. So again, these are examples of different scientific events. I'll be honest, this one's a little bit too small in terms of like figuring out. This one's a little bit small in terms of figuring out. I'm hiding myself at this point in terms of figuring out. It's a word I'm looking for. The actual event, and then I'll pull up another one when it pulls up. So the other example of a timeline for this is this one. And again, you only need to have the years in there. The years are all that's necessary in this. And looking at different events that impacted the world during this time period, and that works as well. The other one that I want to show you is this one's not bad, although this one could use some different. This one has nice titles, but it could use some different. It could use a little more different specific years. Okay, but it does have a nice idea with the timeline here. So as you're looking at this, here's another particular example of this, of the timeline. Another way to look at it. Now this person had to do a one last year that was more based on a character, which you don't have to do. So you don't have to go into quite this much detail, but there's some good events in here. And here's a good example of one that has to do with France, talking about UK's Conservative Party gaining power and so on. So again, back to the years of crisis rubric, post-World War I politics in Great Britain, France, United States, and Germany before Hitler. So if you're looking at this, the first part of chapter 12 will help you with a little bit with that in terms of finding an event that talks about the Kellogg-Briand Pact, the international agreement to stop using war as a method of national policy. And talking about how that led to disarmament, and think about the forming of the United Nations, but how ultimately that fails to stop aggression. And how the interplay of these politics ended up taking place. So again, one from each time period here: Great Britain, France, United States, Germany. It could be any one of those. Rise of fascism in Italy, the Soviet Union under Stalin. Again, here, these are examples of what the timeline ends up looking like. Now, you're going to ask, how do we get to that? So I'm going to post a video that shows this, but here's where you need to pay attention. So insert diagram, and the diagram has different, and you go to timeline. So insert diagram, and the diagram has timelines that look at. You can see how there's different timelines there, and you are able to. Don't forget, you're able to manipulate the the font size and make it bigger. This person should have made it a little bit bigger, maybe made it so it look more like this. You need just a brief description of what's going on when you're looking at this. You just need a brief description of that that event and how it impacted and ended up impacting the time period, and why this time period truly is a year of crisis, or years of crisis, I should say. So that's the timeline, and I've showed you some examples of that. Again, a minimum of 9 events covering a variety of areas. I gave you some starting points at my open book chapter 12. Will help you, but also especially the videos and being able to stop them. And so I would definitely do part 1 first, and then the crisis materials that you can cover, political causes, world between the wars, culture and depression, and Stalin and the Soviet Union. So a variety of videos. Now, that doesn't preclude you from going outside, using outside resources. Okay. So going down to the rubric, one of the things that you need to do is make sure that these are creatively designed with use of effective visuals and minimal grammatical errors. So again, nice pictures, relevant pictures of the event. The slides are appropriate sized and readable. Again, this one is a pretty, let me go over here. This one's a little small. This one's a pretty good example of something that's readable. It has a nice, and this one's a very good example of something that's readable that has a nice size to it, good pictures, and if you choose to use that one. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. So again, having a works consulted placed at the bottom of the slideshow, or the Google or the works consulted placed in the bottom of the slideshow. Is what we need to have. A works consulted place in the bottom of the slide. So let me show you what that looks like. Again, it doesn't have to be. It can just be what you consulted. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be just what you consulted, but it needs to be there. I can't emphasize a couple things enough here. One, I'm putting my face back on because I want to emphasize this. Number one, let's go back to the rubric here. You're doing your own work. If I see 2 timelines that are exactly the same, 0. Probably won't have a chance to redo it. We're running out of time. Number two, you need to make sure that you put a work consultant in there. And because even if you use my videos, just say that. Don't assume that, I just used chapter 12 and that's good. No, you need to say that as well. Okay. In terms of the works consulted. So extra credit. All right. So this is all test score. This is all test weight. There are 3 opportunities for extra credit. Rare for me, very rare. And these are all test weight extra credit. One of the events can be expanded to include an explanation of the details and impact of the event. And you need to record that on Flipgrid with your face in the corner of the screen. And I'll show you that in a moment. So here's an example of they had to do this last year when we were back in regular class, expanding one of the events. Hitler being appointed chancellor. What was the other one that was expanded on here? Hitler's rise. That one isn't very good. It's detailed but not very good. The non-aggression pact signed. I would have preferred bullets there with a picture. He used Stalin's purge, not a good example here. Good example of the information, but needs better bullets here. So again, some of these could have been a little bit better, but in terms of using bullets and making them bigger, but you get the idea. That's option 1. Option 2 is you can choose one or more significant people in this time period and create an Instagram post with 1 hashtag and 1 status update reflecting important information about the person. Use the template provided in the classroom assignment. Include other famous people who would like the post as well. So in the classroom assignment, I believe I have it here. I wish I had pulled it up. Oh, here it is. So you might have to wait a minute while this comes up. It has different. It has a template of an Instagram post, and then you can use like any famous person during the time period. I might suggest some of the famous people, like Hitler, Mussolini, Tojo, the other famous. You could use Neville Chamberlain. You can use any person you want. Who would like it? What would they say? And you would have a picture of the event, and then other things about your username, how people are feeling about this. Again, you get 2 points for each one of those that are made. 2 points for each one of those that are made. You could have one of the artists, Salvador Dali. You could have Einstein. You could have other things. Finding the theory of relativity. Any of the events that you want to blow up and put in an Instagram post, that would probably be a nice thing to do. And again, those are extra credit, up to 6 points if you wish to do them. I have too many tabs open. Okay. So again, those are there for you to be able to do up to three people for 2 points each. And those also must be presented in a flip grid using the option that allows you to print at your screen and face at the same time. So it's not enough just to turn those in. You need to present them and what the actual Instagram post was and the significance. The last one, if you wish to do it, these are all options. You don't have to. You can do all three. You can do one. You can do whatever. You can do 0. Character article. So you're going to write and I'm going to come back up here. You're going to write from a persona, from one of the personas that are listed here, the perspectives: a 22-year-old college-educated woman, a Jewish store owner, a patient of Sigmund Freud, a peasant living in the Soviet Union. So again, you're writing an article detailing how your events affected your chosen character and the importance of the event. So it must have 2 well-developed paragraphs and can be structured like a magazine article, told from the perspective of a person living during the time period. 3 of your timeline events to support and discuss how they connect to your character. So 3 timeline events. I guess I'm going to say here, you don't have to be your timeline because it makes sense. It could be 3 timeline events as support. 3 events that happen during the time period to discuss how they connect to your character. Must have a title and highly encourage you to use some pictures to enhance your article. So let's go over here if I can see if I can find one of these, if it ever opens up. So here's an example of how the German Working Party rose and USSR soldiers were abandoned without hope. What's another example? Years of Crisis, a communist in the Soviet Union. This is a communist in the Soviet Union. He's writing it from the perspective of talking about Stalin's 5-year plan. This person wrote from the perspective of a college-educated woman from London, England, and what she sees, LaShonda Bon Q. They wrote from the perspective of that, and talked about the events how they would perceive the events that were happening. This person wrote from the perspective of a writer in London, and how they would perceive the events. Who did this person write from the perspective of? Let's see if I would ever open up. They wrote about a veteran, a World War I veteran, and how they would perceive the events happening, a German World War I veteran, which is an interesting perspective to ponder. So again, you're thinking about the perspective of one of these people and how they would perceive events that were happening during the time period. Basically, how would they perceive the events that were happening? Again, well written, MLA format, double spaced, and using 3 timeline events as support, and then 3 timeline events as support. Have a title, highly encourage you some pictures, and that's up to 10. And these are all 40%, or excuse me, these are all 60% weighted assignments. These are all 60% weighted assignments. Okay, so you're able to do any or all or none of these as you wish on these extra credits. And the one thing I forgot to show you was Flipgrid. So let me get rid of myself here for a hot minute. So again, here's the timeline event expanded. So here's the one for the timeline event expanded. I have links to these in Classroom. So if you're going to go to this, and add to it, remember that here's how you do it. So you go down to the 3 dots, and you want the screen recording. You want to record what's on your browser tab. So then I'm going to capture what's on my screen. Okay, so it makes it so that I do that, and that's what I wanted. That's what I want to be able to do. Um, and then it'll have me in the corner just like as though we're screencastify. Okay, and that's what you're going to do there. I may come back on Wednesday with an update. This is not due until next. This part, the timeline part, is not due until next Tuesday. So, but I wouldn't say if you want to ruin your Memorial Day weekend, that's fine. But it's not due till next Tuesday. This part. So, I pretty much have gone through this. I don't even know what time I'm at here in this video. But I need to explain everything that was going on. So, and if you don't want to do the extra credit, you don't have to listen to the extra credit part. But that will be what you're doing.